The morning mist hung heavy over Windsor Castle as Thomas Mitchell adjusted his ceremonial uniform for what he thought would be another ordinary day of royal duty. 25 years of faithful service to the crown had taught him to expect the unexpected, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to discover. Thomas had always been different from the other guards. While his colleagues focused solely on protection protocols, he possessed an unusual gift that he kept hidden from everyone around him. Born with an extraordinary ability to read genetic patterns through touch, Thomas had learned early in life to suppress this strange talent. The military didn't need to know about his peculiar sensitivity to bloodlines and family histories that seemed to flow through his fingertips whenever he made contact with another person. The castle was buzzing with preparations for an important state dinner when Thomas received his assignment. Queen Camilla required additional security during a private meeting with several foreign dignitaries. The meeting was scheduled to take place in the Queen's private study, a room Thomas had guarded countless times before. However, something felt different about this particular assignment. As Thomas took his position outside the ornate wooden doors, he noticed unusual activity in the corridors. Palace staff moved with nervous energy, and hushed conversations stopped abruptly whenever he approached. The air itself seemed charged with tension, as if the very walls of the ancient castle were holding their breath. During a brief moment when the Queen emerged from her study to speak with her private secretary, an unexpected accident occurred. A servant carrying a silver tea service stumbled nearby, causing a minor commotion. In the confusion that followed, Thomas instinctively reached out to steady Queen Camilla as she stepped back to avoid the falling tray. The moment their hands touched, Thomas felt the familiar electric sensation that accompanied his genetic readings. But this time something was terribly wrong. The genetic pattern that flowed through his consciousness bore no resemblance to what he expected from a member of the royal bloodline. Instead, he sensed something entirely different, something that made his blood run cold. The reading lasted only seconds, but in that brief moment, Thomas discovered a truth so shocking that it threatened to shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Queen Camilla's DNA carried markers that suggested she was not who the world believed her to be. The genetic signature he detected indicated a lineage that connected to a completely different family tree, one with roots that stretched back to a scandal the royal family had fought desperately to bury decades ago. Thomas maintained his composure, but his mind raced with the implications of what he had learned. He had touched hundreds of people throughout his life, and his ability had never failed him before. The genetic pattern he had detected was unmistakable, clear as fingerprints to his unusual perception. Queen Camilla carried the DNA of someone who should not exist according to official royal records. As the Queen returned to her study, Thomas noticed that she kept glancing back at him with an expression he had never seen before. Her eyes held a mixture of curiosity and concern, as if she sensed that something significant had passed between them during their brief contact. The usual confident bearing that characterized her public appearances seemed to falter slightly whenever their eyes met. The remainder of Thomas's shift passed in a blur of conflicting thoughts and growing anxiety. His loyalty to the crown had been absolute throughout his entire career, but now he found himself in possession of information that could potentially destroy everything he had sworn to protect. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on him like a physical burden, making each breath feel labored and each heartbeat echo loudly in his ears. That evening, as Thomas prepared to leave the castle, he received an unexpected summons. Queen Camilla requested a private audience with him in her personal chambers, a request that was highly unusual given the strict protocols that governed interactions between royalty and security personnel. The message was delivered by her most trusted aide, who emphasized the confidential nature of the meeting. As Thomas made his way through the dimly lit corridors toward the Queen's private quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. The genetic secret he had uncovered was not something that could be easily ignored or forgotten. The truth he carried in his consciousness was like a time bomb, ticking away with the potential to explode into a scandal that would rock the monarchy to its core. Standing outside the Queen's chamber doors, Thomas took a deep breath and tried to prepare himself for what was about to unfold. He had no way of knowing whether Queen Camilla suspected what he had discovered, or if this meeting was simply a coincidence. But deep in his heart, He understood that secrets of this magnitude rarely remained hidden for long, and the royal family's carefully constructed public image was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The Queen's private chambers were far more intimate than the grand halls Thomas was accustomed to guarding. Soft lamplight cast gentle shadows across antique furniture and family photographs that told the story of a life lived in the public eye. Queen Camilla sat in a high-backed chair, her usual regal composure intact, but Thomas could detect subtle signs of nervousness in the way her fingers drummed silently against the armrest. "Please, sit down, Thomas," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. The use of his first name immediately signaled that this conversation would be unlike any interaction they had shared before. "I believe we need to have a very important discussion about what happened earlier today." Thomas felt his heart rate accelerate as he settled into the offered chair. The Queen's direct approach confirmed his worst fears. She knew, somehow, she had sensed that their brief contact had revealed more than either of them had anticipated. He remained silent, waiting for her to continue, while his mind raced through possible responses to whatever questions she might ask. "I've always been sensitive to people's reactions," Queen Camilla continued, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to age her before Thomas's eyes. 20 years of public scrutiny teaches you to read faces, to notice when someone has learned something they weren't supposed to know. The way you looked at me after our hands touched, Thomas, that wasn't the expression of a guard who had simply helped prevent an accident." Thomas cleared his throat carefully, still uncertain how much he should reveal about his unusual ability. "Your Majesty, I'm not sure what you mean." "I was simply doing my duty to ensure your safety during the commotion with the tea service." The Queen smiled sadly, shaking her head. "Thomas, your military record is exceptional. 25 years of service, countless commendations, and a reputation for absolute discretion. But there's something else about you, isn't there? Something that makes you different from the other guards. I can see it in your eyes right now. The burden of knowledge that you're carrying." The silence that followed stretched between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. Thomas realized that denying what had happened would be futile. Queen Camilla possessed the same intuitive intelligence that had helped her navigate decades of public life and royal politics. She had survived scandals, media attacks, and public disapproval through her ability to read situations and people with remarkable accuracy. "How long have you known?" Thomas asked quietly, abandoning his attempts at deflection. The question carried multiple meanings, and both of them understood the deeper implications of what he was really asking. Queen Camilla's composure finally cracked, and Thomas saw tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I've suspected something was different about my background for years, but I never had concrete proof. Strange inconsistencies in family documents, medical records that didn't quite match, and old photographs that raised questions I was afraid to ask. But today, when you touched my hand, I saw the recognition in your face. You know something definitive, don't you?" Thomas nodded slowly, realizing that this conversation had moved far beyond anything he could have prepared for. "Your Majesty, I have an unusual ability that allows me to read genetic information through physical contact. What I discovered when I touched your hand earlier, it's something that could have serious implications for the royal family." "Tell me," she whispered, leaning forward in her chair. "Please, Thomas, I need to know the truth, whatever it might be. I've lived with questions and doubts for so long that the uncertainty has become more painful than any truth could possibly be." Thomas took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would forever change the relationship between them and potentially alter the course of royal history. "The genetic pattern I detected indicates that you're not biologically related to your official family lineage. Instead, your DNA suggests a connection to a completely different bloodline, one that appears to be linked to a historical scandal involving the royal family from several decades ago." The Queen's face went pale, and she gripped the arms of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Are you saying that everything I believed about my identity, about who I am and where I come from, has been a lie?" "Not a lie," Thomas said gently, "but perhaps a carefully constructed alternative to a truth that someone felt was too dangerous to reveal. Your genetic markers suggest that you may be connected to members of the royal family in a way that was never officially acknowledged." Queen Camilla stood up abruptly and walked to the window, gazing out at the moonlit castle grounds. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "There were always whispers, Rumors about secret relationships and hidden children. I heard stories growing up, fragments of gossip that never seemed to add up to anything coherent. But if what you're telling me is true, then those whispers might have been more accurate than anyone realized. Thomas watched as the Queen processed this revelation, understanding that he was witnessing a moment of profound personal crisis. The woman who had spent decades in the public eye, who had weathered countless storms and emerged stronger each time, was now confronting the possibility that her entire sense of self had been built on incomplete or inaccurate information. "What happens now?" she asked, turning back to face him. "If this information becomes public, it could destroy not just me, but the entire institution of the monarchy. The scandal would be enormous, and the political implications could be catastrophic." Thomas realized that he was no longer just a guard with an unusual secret. He had become a key player in a situation that could reshape the British royal family and potentially influence the stability of the constitutional monarchy itself. The weight of this responsibility pressed down on him as he considered the various paths that lay ahead. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "that decision isn't mine to make, but I want you to know that my loyalty to the crown and to you personally remains absolute, regardless of what my ability has revealed. The question is, what do you want to do with this information?" Queen Camilla spent the next 3 days in what palace staff described as a period of intensive private reflection. Thomas continued his regular duties, but he could feel the tension building throughout Windsor Castle like pressure before a storm. Servants whispered in corners, and even the most senior staff members seemed nervous about something they couldn't quite identify. On the 4th day, Thomas received another summons to the Queen's private study. This time, however, he wasn't alone. As he entered the room, he found Queen Camilla seated at an antique desk, covered with old documents, photograph albums, and what appeared to be genealogical charts. Her expression was a mixture of determination and exhaustion, suggesting she had spent countless hours researching her newfound suspicions. "Thomas, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I've been doing some investigation of my own since our conversation. What I've discovered is both fascinating and terrifying." She picked up a faded photograph from the desk and held it toward him. This picture was taken in 1952. And it shows my grandmother with someone I was always told was a distant family friend. But look closely at the man standing beside her. Thomas studied the photograph carefully. The man in question bore a striking resemblance to members of the royal family from that era, with distinctive facial features that seemed familiar despite the image's age. "He looks like he could be related to the royal bloodline," Thomas observed. "Exactly," Queen Camilla replied. "His name was Edward Ashworth, and according to the documents I've managed to locate, he was involved in a relationship with Princess Margaret during the early 1950s. What makes this significant is that Edward Ashworth was my grandmother's younger brother, which would make him my great-uncle." The implications of this revelation began to dawn on Thomas as Queen Camilla continued her explanation. If Princess Margaret had been involved with Queen Camilla's great-uncle, and if that relationship had produced a child who was secretly adopted or placed within the Ashworth family, then Queen Camilla might indeed carry royal DNA through an illegitimate but direct bloodline connection. "There's more," she continued, pulling out a medical document that appeared to be several decades old. "I found this in my late mother's papers. It's a birth certificate that lists a different father than the man I always believed to be my grandfather. The name on this certificate is Edward Ashworth, and the date corresponds perfectly with what would have been the timeline for Princess Margaret's secret pregnancy." Thomas felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to align with the genetic information he had detected during their brief contact. "Your Majesty, this would explain exactly what I sensed when I touched your hand. You do carry royal DNA, but through a bloodline that was deliberately hidden to avoid scandal during a much more conservative era." Queen Camilla nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "The problem is that this information, while it explains my genetic background, also creates an entirely new set of complications. If I am indeed the granddaughter of Princess Margaret through an illegitimate relationship, then my position as queen consort takes on a completely different meaning. Some might argue that it legitimizes my role, while others could claim it represents a fundamental deception." The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the study door. Queen Camilla's private secretary entered with an expression of barely controlled panic. "Your Majesty, I apologize for the interruption, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention." There are reporters from several major newspapers gathering outside the castle gates, and they're asking specific questions about historical royal family connections and DNA evidence. Thomas felt his blood run cold. Somehow information about Queen Camilla's genetic background had begun to leak beyond the walls of Windsor Castle. The careful investigation they had been conducting in private was about to become a very public scandal that would dominate headlines around the world. How could they possibly know about this? Queen Camilla asked, her voice tight with concern. "We've been extremely careful to keep our investigation confidential." Her secretary shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, it appears that someone with access to historical royal archives has been sharing documents with journalists. The reporters are specifically mentioning Edward Ashworth by name and asking about DNA testing related to Princess Margaret's descendants." Thomas realized that they were facing a crisis that extended far beyond their private discovery. Someone else had been investigating the same historical connections, and that person had decided to make the information public. The careful, controlled approach that Queen Camilla had been taking was about to be overwhelmed by a media firestorm that would demand immediate answers to questions she was still trying to understand herself. "Your Majesty," Thomas said quietly, "I think we need to consider the possibility that my ability to detect your genetic background wasn't the first time someone has uncovered this information. There may be others who have known about your royal bloodline for years, and they've chosen this moment to make it public for their own reasons." Queen Camilla stood up and walked to the window, where she could see the growing crowd of reporters and camera crews gathering beyond the castle gates. "Thomas, I need you to help me make a decision that could affect the monarchy for generations to come. We can either try to suppress this information and hope it goes away, or we can take control of the narrative and reveal the truth on our own terms." The weight of this decision settled over both of them as they realized that the next few hours would determine not only Queen Camilla's future, but potentially the entire direction of the British royal family. The secret that Thomas had discovered through an accidental touch had now become the center of a crisis that would test the monarchy's ability to adapt and survive. In an era where truth and transparency were increasingly demanded by the public. "Whatever you decide," Thomas said, "I want you to know that I will support you completely. My loyalty isn't just to the crown as an institution, but to the person who wears it with dignity and courage." Within hours, the situation outside Windsor Castle had escalated beyond anything the royal press office had ever managed. Television crews from around the world set up their equipment, and social media exploded with speculation about the royal DNA secret that was about to be revealed. The hashtag #RoyalBloodline began trending globally as millions of people waited for official confirmation or denial of the rumors. Thomas found himself at the center of a security nightmare as palace officials struggled to maintain order while protecting the Queen's privacy. Emergency meetings were called with senior members of the royal household, government officials, and legal advisors who needed to understand the full scope of the situation before any public statements could be made. In a secure conference room deep within the castle, Thomas was asked to explain his unusual ability to a small group of trusted advisors. The revelation that a royal guard possessed the genetic reading capability initially met with skepticism, until Queen Camilla herself confirmed that Thomas's assessment of her DNA had been verified through conventional testing she had secretly commissioned. "The question we face," said Lord Pemberton, the Queen's senior legal advisor, "is whether this information represents a threat to the monarchy or an opportunity to strengthen it. If Her Majesty is indeed descended from Princess Margaret through a previously unknown bloodline, then her position as Queen Consort actually has a stronger foundation than we originally understood." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the royal family's geneticist, had been brought in to analyze the evidence Thomas and Queen Camilla had compiled. "The genetic markers are unmistakable," she confirmed. "Queen Camilla carries DNA that is consistent with direct descent from the royal bloodline through Princess Margaret. The relationship appears to be exactly what the historical documents suggest." Thomas watched as Queen Camilla processed this scientific confirmation of what his ability had revealed days earlier. The woman who had spent her entire adult life defending her right to be part of the royal family was now learning that she had been royal by blood all along, just not in the way anyone had expected. "There's something else we need to consider," Queen Camilla said quietly. "If this information becomes public, it will inevitably lead to questions about how many other secrets the royal family has kept hidden over the decades. The media will demand to know what else we haven't told them, and they'll start investigating every historical relationship and birth record they can find." The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the broader implications of this revelation. The British monarchy had survived numerous scandals throughout its history, but the digital age had created an environment where secrets were much harder to maintain and public scrutiny was more intense than ever. Before, Thomas's phone buzzed with an urgent message from his security supervisor. The crowd outside the castle gates had grown to several thousand people, and some were demanding that Queen Camilla appear publicly to address the rumors. The situation was becoming increasingly difficult to control, and there were concerns about public safety as more people arrived throughout the afternoon. "Your Majesty," Thomas said, reading the message aloud, "the security situation is deteriorating rapidly. We need to make a decision about how to respond before this becomes unmanageable." Queen Camilla stood up and moved to a window that overlooked the castle grounds. Even from this distance, she could see the lights from television, cameras, and hear the murmur of the crowd that had gathered to witness what might be one of the most significant royal announcements in decades. "I've made my decision," she announced, turning back to face the room. "We're going to tell the truth, all of it, in a formal statement that I will deliver personally. The British people deserve to know that their queen consort has been honest with them, even when she didn't know the complete truth about herself." Lord Pemberton looked concerned. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, revealing this information will create a constitutional crisis. There will be questions about the validity of your marriage to King Charles, about the succession, and about what other family secrets might exist. Then we'll answer those questions honestly," Queen Camilla replied firmly. "The monarchy has survived because it has been able to adapt to changing times and public expectations. If we try to hide this information, it will eventually come out anyway, and the damage to our credibility will be far worse than if we address it openly now." Thomas felt a deep admiration for Queen Camilla's courage as she prepared to face one of the most challenging moments of her public life. The woman who had once been dismissed by critics as an outsider to the royal family was about to reveal that she had been connected to the monarchy by blood all along, through a hidden branch of the family tree that told a story of love, sacrifice, and carefully guarded secrets. "I want Thomas to be present when I make the announcement," Queen Camilla continued. "His ability to detect genetic information is part of this story, and the public deserves to understand how this discovery was made. We're not going to hide behind partial truths or diplomatic language. The complete story needs to be told." The legal and communications teams began working frantically to prepare for a press conference that would need to be carefully structured to convey complex genetic and historical information to a global audience. Meanwhile, Thomas realized that his quiet career as a royal guard was about to end, replaced by a very different kind of service to the crown as a key witness to one of the most extraordinary royal revelations in modern history. As the sun began to set over Windsor Castle, Thomas looked out at the crowd of reporters, photographers, and curious citizens who had gathered to witness history in the making. Within hours, the world would learn that Queen Camilla's royal bloodline had been hidden in plain sight for decades, and that sometimes the most profound truths could be discovered through the briefest and most unexpected moments of human contact. The grand ballroom of Windsor Castle had been hastily converted into a press conference venue, with television cameras positioned to capture every angle of what would undoubtedly become one of the most watched royal addresses in history. Thomas stood at the back of the room in his dress uniform, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him, as journalists from around the world waited for Queen Camilla to make her unprecedented announcement. At exactly 7 o'clock in the evening, Queen Camilla entered the ballroom with the composed dignity that had characterized her public appearances throughout her royal career. However, Thomas could detect subtle signs of nervousness in her bearing, the slight tremor in her hands as she approached the podium, and the way she paused for a moment to collect herself before beginning to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, and to the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth," she began, her voice clear and steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. "I stand before you today to share information about my family background, that I myself only learned of recently. Information that has profound implications for my role as your queen consort. The room was so quiet that Thomas could hear the soft whir of cameras and the scratching of pens on paper as reporters prepared to document every word of this historic moment. Queen Camilla continued, "For the past week I have been conducting research into my genealogical background, following an unexpected discovery made by one of my trusted security personnel. What we learned challenges everything I believed about my family, history, and reveals connections to the royal bloodline that were hidden for more than 70 years. Thomas felt his heart rate increase as Queen Camilla gestured toward him. Thomas Mitchell, who has served the royal family with distinction for 25 years, possesses an unusual ability to detect genetic information through physical contact. During what seemed like a routine interaction, Thomas discovered that my DNA carries markers, indicating direct descent from Princess Margaret, through a relationship that was never publicly acknowledged. The reaction from the press corps was immediate and dramatic. Reporters began shouting questions, cameras flashed continuously, and the controlled atmosphere of the press conference threatened to dissolve into chaos. Queen Camilla raised her hand, requesting silence, and gradually the room returned to order. "I understand that this revelation raises many questions," she continued, "and I am prepared to answer them as completely as possible. The evidence indicates that my great-uncle, Edward Ashworth, was involved in a relationship with Princess Margaret in the early 1950s that resulted in the birth of my grandfather. This child was quietly placed within the Ashworth family to avoid the scandal that such a revelation would have caused during that era. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the royal geneticist, was then invited to present the scientific evidence that confirmed Thomas's unusual discovery. She explained the genetic testing process, the historical documentation that supported the DNA findings, and the genealogical research that had traced the hidden family connections across multiple generations. "The genetic evidence is conclusive," Dr. Mitchell stated. "Her Majesty Queen Camilla is indeed a direct descendant of Princess Margaret, and therefore carries authentic royal bloodline DNA. This discovery doesn't diminish her position within the royal family, but rather provides a biological foundation for her role that no one previously understood." The questions from reporters came in rapid succession, each more probing than the last. They wanted to know how long the royal family had suspected this connection, whether King Charles had been aware of his wife's hidden bloodline, and what implications this revelation might have for the line of succession. Queen Camilla answered each question with remarkable composure, explaining that neither she nor King Charles had any knowledge of these genetic connections until Thomas's accidental discovery had prompted their investigation. She emphasized that her role as queen consort remained unchanged, but that she felt the public deserved to know the complete truth about her background. "This revelation teaches us something important about the nature of identity and belonging," Queen Camilla said, her voice gaining strength as she addressed the deeper implications of her discovery. "I spent decades being criticized as an outsider to the royal family, someone who didn't belong in this institution. Now we learn that I was connected to the monarchy by blood all along, through ancestors who made difficult choices to protect family members and avoid public scandal." Thomas watched as Queen Camilla's announcement began to shift the narrative that had surrounded her entire royal career. The woman who had been portrayed as a controversial figure, who had somehow infiltrated the royal family, was now revealed to be someone who had belonged there genetically from the beginning, even though neither she nor anyone else had understood that connection. The international reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with discussions about the implications of Queen Camilla's hidden royal bloodline, while news organizations around the world scrambled to analyze the historical and constitutional significance of this revelation. Public opinion polls conducted within hours of the announcement showed a dramatic shift in how people viewed Queen Camilla's legitimacy as a member of the royal family. The press conference concluded and the journalists filed out to write their stories. Thomas realized that his life would never be the same. His unusual genetic reading ability had been revealed to the world, transforming him from an anonymous security guard into a key figure in royal history. The quiet career he had built protecting the royal family had evolved into something entirely different, and he would now need to navigate the complex responsibilities that came with being a public figure in his own right. Queen Camilla approached Thomas as the ballroom emptied, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Thank you," she said simply. "Without your unique gift and your willingness to help me understand the truth, I would have lived the rest of my life not knowing who I really am or where I truly belong." Thomas nodded, understanding that they had both been forever changed by this experience. The accidental touch that had revealed Queen Camilla's genetic secret had created ripple effects that would influence the royal family, the British people, and the institution of monarchy itself for generations to come. 3 months after Queen Camilla's unprecedented announcement, the effects of the revelation continued to reshape both the royal family and British society in ways no one could have anticipated. Thomas had been promoted to a new position as special advisor for historical verification, a role created specifically to utilize his unique genetic reading abilities in helping the royal family understand other potential hidden connections in their extensive genealogical history. The public reaction to Queen Camilla's revelation had been overwhelmingly positive, with opinion polls showing that her honesty and transparency had actually strengthened support for the monarchy rather than damaging it. People appreciated her courage in revealing information that could have been kept secret, and many saw her hidden royal bloodline as validation of something they had always sensed about her natural dignity and grace. Thomas now worked from a specially designed office within Windsor Castle, where he collaborated with historians, geneticists, and genealogical researchers to investigate other potential family mysteries that had accumulated over centuries of royal history. His ability had proven invaluable in verifying historical claims and uncovering connections that traditional research methods had missed. One particularly significant discovery had emerged just 2 weeks earlier when Thomas had been asked to verify the ancestry of several individuals who claimed distant royal connections. Through his genetic readings, he had identified 3 previously unknown descendants of minor royal family members, providing them with documentation that helped complete their family histories and resolve questions that had puzzled genealogists for decades. The international scientific community had also taken interest in Thomas's abilities, with researchers from several universities requesting opportunities to study his genetic reading capability. However, Thomas had chosen to limit his involvement in scientific research, preferring to focus his unusual gift on serving the royal family and helping ordinary people understand their own family connections. Queen Camilla had undergone her own transformation during these months. The revelation about her hidden royal bloodline had given her a new sense of confidence and belonging that was evident in all her public appearances. She spoke with greater authority about royal traditions and family history, drawing upon knowledge that seemed to flow naturally from her newly understood genetic heritage. King Charles had been remarkably supportive throughout the entire process, publicly stating that learning about his wife's royal bloodline had only strengthened his love and admiration for her. The revelation had also sparked broader conversations within the royal family about the importance of transparency and honesty in their relationships with the British people. Thomas often reflected on how a single moment of accidental contact had led to such profound changes in so many lives. The brief touch that had revealed Queen Camilla's genetic secret had demonstrated the power of truth to heal old wounds and create new possibilities for understanding and acceptance. The media attention surrounding both Queen Camilla and Thomas had gradually settled into a more sustainable pattern, with occasional interviews and documentary features, rather than the intense scrutiny that had characterized the initial weeks following the announcement. Thomas had learned to navigate his new public role while maintaining his fundamental commitment to serving the royal family with discretion and loyalty. Educational institutions across the United Kingdom had incorporated the story of Queen Camilla's discovery into their curricula as an example of how genetic science could illuminate historical mysteries and challenge long-held assumptions about family relationships. The revelation had also inspired increased interest in genealogical research among the general public, with many people seeking to understand their own family histories more completely. Perhaps most importantly, the experience had strengthened the bond between Queen Camilla and Thomas, creating a unique friendship based on shared participation in one of the most remarkable discoveries in modern royal history. They met regularly to discuss ongoing genealogical research and to plan how Thomas's abilities could continue to serve the monarchy in positive and constructive ways. As Thomas sat in his office one quiet afternoon, Reviewing historical documents related to potential new research projects, he received a personal note from Queen Camilla, expressing her gratitude for his role in helping her discover her true identity. The note concluded with a sentiment that captured the lasting impact of their extraordinary experience together. "Dear Thomas," she had written, "you gave me the greatest gift anyone can receive, the truth about who I really am. Through your unique ability and your willingness to help me understand what it meant, I learned that belonging isn't just about titles or public recognition, but about the deeper connections that link us to our ancestors and to each other. The royal bloodline that runs through my veins was always there, waiting to be discovered, just as your remarkable gift was always part of you, waiting for the right moment to serve a purpose greater than either of us could have imagined." Thomas smiled as he read these words, understanding that his accidental discovery of Queen Camilla's genetic secret had ultimately revealed something profound about the nature of truth, identity, and belonging. The moment when their hands had briefly touched had changed both of their lives forever, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries emerge from the most ordinary circumstances. The royal guard, who had spent 25 years protecting secrets, had finally helped reveal one that brought healing and understanding rather than scandal and shame. In doing so, Thomas had discovered his own true purpose, using his unusual gift not to uncover damaging information, but to help people understand their authentic connections to history, family, and each other. The story of Queen Camilla's DNA secret had become a testament to the power of honesty and courage in the face of uncertainty, demonstrating that truth, even when unexpected or complicated, could ultimately strengthen rather than destroy the institutions and relationships we hold most dear.